What's up, guys? Welcome back. So I bet after the last episode I left a bunch of you in suspense wondering why I just ripped the entire car back apart and why I removed the wrap that I just had installed on the car. But rest assured, I'm going to be dropping a ton of spoilers in this episode, so let's get to it. Alright, so let's get right into it. I'm sure the first thing you notice right away is the rear glass is out of the car. And there's a reason why it's out of the car, because I need to remove the rear quarter panels. Now looking at the quarter panels, obviously there's no damage, there's nothing wrong with them, besides some places where the paint lifted when I removed the wrap, but really no reason at all why these quarter panels have to come off the car. Unless I got my hands on a brand new WRC body kit. It's just a little bit more crazy than the kit I have right now, but more on that a little bit later. First thing I need to do before I can remove the quarter panels is strip these rear doors down, get them removed from the car, and then I'll come right back to you guys when I'm ready to start removing the quarter panels. Let's get into it. So got both of the rear doors off of the car, and now we can finally move on to removing these quarter panels. Now, this is actually my first time ever removing a quarter panel from a car, but you know what? Last year removing the roof was also my first time, and that wasn't too bad, so hopefully these quarter panels aren't any harder. But what I basically need to do is come up along here, get rid of any seam sealer or body filler that was put on by the factory, and then just try and find as many spot welds as I can. Get all the spot welds drilled out, and then I also need to use a cutoff wheel and come up along this body seam here, right along this line, and just all the way along the edge in behind the trim here, and anywhere else, and use a cutoff wheel to remove the rest of the quarter panel. So yeah, let's get this removed from the car. Alright, so as you can see, all of these spot welds along the front part of the quarter panel here have been all drilled out. And going to the back of the quarter panel, I know I had just said that there were spot welds back here I also needed to drill out. But after taking my wire wheel to the inside of the quarter panel here, and now that I can see where each panel is actually overlapping and has been spot welded at the factory, it turns out that I can't drill out any of these spot welds back here, as the inner frame structure of the trunk area that holds the quarter panel and everything together is actually part of the original quarter panel. So what I'm gonna have to do is just cut right along this edge in here and separate the quarter panel that way and leave the rest of the structure of the trunk area all intact. I'm also gonna put some masking tape down up along the top edge of the C-pillar here, as I don't wanna scratch this when I cut along this line here. And here's a little tip for you I learned the hard way many times in the past. Anytime you're ever cutting any sheet metal on the body of a car with a cutting disc, you really want to take your time and cut very slowly, because all it takes is just a little too much heat on any of these panels and they'll fold in and buckle on themselves, and then you're screwed. So take your time and cut very slowly whenever you're cutting sheet metal. But that said, let's draw some lines on the quarter panel and cut this thing out. right, and there you have it. The passenger side quarter panel is removed from the car. It wasn't too bad for the most part to get it all cut out and removed. The only area that really gave me trouble was in here around the inner wheel tub structure. I had no clue that this huge bracket was spot welded in behind the quarter panel. So for now, I just cut around it just to get the quarter panel removed, and now I need to decide if I'm going to remove this piece altogether or maybe cut it and modify it in some way when I go to weld in the new inner wheel tubs. And this is pretty funny. You know when you're working on your car and you always lose 1 or 2 bolts in some crazy little hole somewhere and you just never see it again? Well, check this out. Look what's hiding down here in this area that you more than likely would never ever see. I got a bunch of bolts and everything down here, and actually, hold on a second. What's this? Is that what I think it is? A 10 mil socket. No way. That's a score right there. But anyways, I am going to remove the driver's side quarter panel from the car, and then we'll go to what's next. Alright, so now that both quarter panels are removed from the car and I've taken a better look at this big ugly bracket sitting here, and clearly it doesn't really do anything. I think it's just there for rigidity from the factory in case you get in an accident or something like that. But all in all, this bracket is just floating here. It doesn't do anything, and they're actually pretty thick, pretty heavy, so some more weight savings is always a bonus. So let's get these removed from the car, and then I'll show you guys the new quarter panels. Alright, so now that I have these brackets removed off of both sides of the car, and it's actually got a little bit of weight to it, maybe 1 or 2 pounds. So that's good for about 3 to 4 pounds in weight savings overall, so that's a bonus. But now it's time to give you guys a sneak peek of the brand new wide body kit that I'm installing on the car. And right down here below me I have the new quarter panel, and without further ado, here it is. So that is the new quarter panel that is going on the car, and it's actually molded from a ProDrive Subaru WRC S11 rally car. Doesn't get any better than that. And one of the things you'll notice right away between the Subaru WRC replica wide body kit I previously had installed is the height in the wheel arch. So if you look here on the previous wide body kit, you can see from the wheel arch line up to the wide body transition point here, we've got about 4 inches total in height. Whereas on the new quarter panel, you see it's only about 1 inch, which means the wheel arch is about 3 inches higher overall. Another thing you'll notice right away is that there is no fuel door on the new WRC quarter panel. And again, since I am running a fuel cell in the car, I no longer need the fuel door, so that is obviously one extra cool thing to have. Another big difference between the two of them is the weight difference. So the factory quarter panel being sheet metal, and then the WRC replica wide body kit, which was actually fiberglass, that right there is probably about 8 to 10 pounds, whereas the new composite quarter panel is maybe about 1 pound. It's very, very light. So again, just more weight savings overall. So I've already gone ahead and actually trimmed the quarter panel and made some adjustments to where I cut everything and massaged everything to get the quarter panel to fit, just so I could show you guys how it lines up on the car and what it looks like. After I show you how that fits, we'll jump over to the driver's side. And again, I just need to basically make some adjustments to everywhere that I cut on the car. Everything needs to be trimmed back so the quarter panel fits just right. You want to make sure that all of the body lines line up everywhere, and everything fits good. So let's throw this quarter panel on the car and see what it looks like. All right, so again, as I was saying, you can see how super light this quarter panel is. Doesn't weigh very much. full composite. It's not carbon fiber. So let's get this mounted up on the car and see how it looks. And again, like I said, I've already made some trimmings and adjustments to get this to fit properly, just so I can show you guys. But this is how it fits onto the car. It's down back here. And then what I can do is throw some of these clamps on to get everything fully into position. Alright, so as I was saying, you can see how everything fits really nicely. I've already made the adjustments up along here where I've cut along the factory quarter panel. Everything comes perfectly nice around back here where the taillight joins in. I do have to make some adjustments up under here, and I also need to, you can see looking at the original wheel tub where it's been cut out, so I'm going to have to actually extend this right out to the edge here. Obviously you can see it's a lot wider than the original car. And I also need to cut off the back portion of the rockers here, and it actually needs to be pushed back as the new quarter panel actually goes a little bit more forward as well. Also looking at the door jambs, you can see this is a lot wider of a door jamb than the factory quarter panel, of course. Super happy with how it looks. Everything fits really nice. When I'm finally ready to bond it to the car, I'm going to basically be using a type of a urethane adhesive. And then of course there's going to be a little bit of body work up in this area that's going to be needed to join the factory C-pillar to the new wide body quarter panel. And then of course this is from the molding process. I'm going to have to do some body work on this line right across here. Alright, so now that you have a rough idea of what this looks like, let's jump over to the driver's side and get the driver's side quarter panel all test fit up. Alright, so that should give you a bit of a rough idea of what it took to get these quarter panels fitted to the car. Even going back to removing the factory quarter panels and drawing all my cut lines everywhere, I was actually taking reference off of these WRC quarter panels, took some measurements and even eyeballed it in a couple other spots where I needed to make my cuts. And even when I drew my lines on the car, I didn't cut directly on the line, I actually cut a little bit below the line, because I knew when it was time to fit the quarter panels on, I was still going to have to trim a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that I had lots of extra material and didn't cut too far away, and the next thing you know, I couldn't fix it. But the quarter panel is about 95% fitment right now. Now I'm going to wait until the rear doors and the trunk lid are installed, then I can actually check my gaps up here between the trunk and the quarter panel, and same thing over here between the rear door and the quarter panel. At that point, once I know fitment is 100%, then I can actually bond the quarter panel to the car. But speaking of those rear doors, and that is the new rear door for the WRC Widebody kit. Now, I've already gone ahead and prepared the door before I could install it on the car. Some of the things I had to do were drill out the holes up here for the factory door handle and just clean up some of the edges so the handle fit properly. Moving to the front edge of the door here, you can see I've already gone ahead and installed the factory door hinges. And basically what I did there was custom make some aluminum reinforcement brackets, which are then rib nutted to the door directly. And just that way, it just distributes the load, as the composite material on the door is pretty thin as it is, and I just didn't want anything cracking or breaking over time. And then the factory door hinges just bolt right into those rib nuts. And actually, believe it or not, these two hinges alone are more weight than the entire rear door combined. This rear door is very, very light. Moving to the back of the door here, as you can see how light it is, that is very effortlessly to lift it up, which I can guarantee you cannot do with the factory door. Here's another look at the hinges where they're bolted on, and you can see just in between where the rib nuts are secured onto the door. And actually you can probably even see in there the aluminum reinforcement brackets that I made, as I was saying, to distribute the load. I'm also going to be reusing my power window motors, at least for the time being. So what I've done is gone ahead and drilled out the holes for the power window motor and some of these notches and holes where the window tracks bolt into. I've also notched out the holes up here where the interior door handle bolts onto. And moving to the back edge of the door here, you can see where I've drilled out the holes and notched out this giant hole where the door latch mechanism goes into. But that's going to do it for preparing the rear doors to install them on the car. So now I'm going to get these doors mounted on the car, and then I can move on to final test fitment of the quarter panel, make sure everything lines up perfectly, and then move on to extending and welding in the new rear wheel tubs. Let's get to it. All right, so I got the rear bumper temporarily mounted onto the car, and I went ahead and took my Sharpie and just figured out that I'm gonna have to cut some of the factory material off of the back edge of the wheel tub here, and same thing with the back 2 inches of the rocker panel in order to extend the inner wheel tub structure out to the brand new quarter panel. But with everything just kind of sitting there, even though it's not all 100% in place, looks really good to see this new WRC Widebody kit coming together, and really huge difference to what I had on the car before. But as you can see, fitment is pretty good. Everything's lining up for the most part until everything's tweaked. The only reason why this edge is sticking out is because the bumper is actually hitting this material here. So once I cut that out, that back bumper should get tucked in nicely. Back doors, everything's fitting pretty good. Once the quarter panels are 100% secure, then I can go into making the proper alignments with the door and the bumper and everything else, but looks awesome overall. So the next thing to do now is remove the door, quarter panel, and rear bumper, and then bust out the grinder and cut out all of these places I just marked with the Sharpie, and begin fabrication on the new inner wheel tub structure to bring it out to the new quarter panel. Let's get to it. All right, as you can see, I already went ahead and installed the rear door, the rear quarter panel, rear bumper, and even installed the trunk lid. That way I can get all the alignment on all of these body panels as close as I can to their final position. Moving back to the inner wheel wells here, now that all these panels are mounted back on the car, I can start measuring and cutting my sheet metal to build the outer wheel tubs. So let's get to cutting some sheet metal and weld in these outer wheel tubs. Alright, so that's going to do it for the outer wheel tub structures on both sides of the car. And you can see here I actually did it in 2 separate pieces. I couldn't get away with doing it in 1 complete piece, and this way was a little bit easier. I also went ahead and made these small little pieces back here, and this just reinforces the back edge of the wheel tub a little bit, and also when I go to bond the new quarter panel to the car, it gives me a lot more surface area for the quarter panel to slide under, and I can put a lot more adhesive in this area, opposed to the little 1/4 inch edge that I originally had. Now the next thing I'm going to do is actually extend the bottom edge of the wheel tub. I've already gone ahead and made this template here and give you an idea what I'm doing. This is going to weld down here to the bottom of the car, and you can see here it's actually going to add a little bit more material to this bottom edge here, and then also on the outside edge here, really adding a lot of material down. And what I'm basically doing is replacing this piece. Now this is one of the factory pieces that was on the bumper, and I just don't want to reuse that plastic piece. I'm going to basically rebuild this with some sheet metal, and I think it'll look a lot better and clear up the gaps instead of having some random plastic pieces body clipping onto the car. Now, I didn't film this last little bit, but I did go ahead and make these panels out of those templates that I just showed you that I cut out. This is all welded in now, all finished, and all I need to do now is just give everything a coat of primer, and then I can go ahead and install the new quarter panels on the car, and then finally move on to the front part of the wide body kit. But that's gonna do it for me today, guys. I will see you in the next episode.